thank you for your questions and thank you for the votes. So it seems the top two ones are, what is the best way to define what is a product, and how can you teach the organization what is a product? And then based on your experience, what are the main challenges product owners have when it comes to stakeholder collaboration and how to solve them? So how about if we start with the very first question, what a product is? To me, that seems pretty fundamental. I mean, I have to say I've got a product and a product management bias. But even if you don't work primarily with product people like I do, if you apply a framework like Scrum, there's a product backlog, there's a product increments, and most recently there's even a product goal, and of course there's a product owner. So there's a lot of product, so it's worthwhile to reflect on what is a product, how can we define a product. So let's start there. And can I share my screen?
You should be able to, yeah.
Cool. Yes. So hopefully you can see a screen that isn't too exciting yet. And now a slide that says Amy A, Agile main. Now product. And I thought I'll just use my iPad here to visualize some of the ideas that I may be mentioning, just so it's a little bit more interesting and maybe slightly easier to understand what I'm trying to communicate. So what is a product? I like to think of a product as so different people have different definitions of what a product is, but it seems to me that I'll share mine. So for me, a product is, so we have a product here. A product is an asset, and in the context of digital products or software, that would be essentially a piece of code plus possibly additional artifacts. So we have some assets, and we have an asset. And for this asset to qualify as a product, there has to be a group of beneficiaries. So there has to be a group of users, possibly customers. So users are the people who use the product. Customers are the people who pay for the product in one way or another. So I'm using Microsoft Office PowerPoint here. I'm the user of the product. And my business has licensed or subscribed to Microsoft Office. So my business will be the customer, right? So I've got users and customers, and the product has to do a specific job for those individuals. It has to address a specific need, or it has to solve or address a problem, or create a specific benefit. Or another way to put this is it has to allow the users, in this case the customers, to achieve a specific goal. So there has to be a real reason for people to engage with the product, to use the product, and to pay for the product. So there has to be a need here. And that is then, you could say, the value that the product creates towards those individuals, towards these users and customers. So if I wanted to, say, create a new healthy eating product, then I'd have to think about who would benefit from such a product. And I might decide I'll go for people like myself, middle-aged men who maybe not always have super healthy eating habits, but, should maybe start to consider changing their eating habits in order to avoid, say, the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And that could be the benefit. So, the benefit of using the product might be to reduce the risk of developing type 2 diabetes. And so, again, it's very important to be clear on who would use the product, particularly who would use the product, and then, why would people want to use it? What is the specific value that the product creates to those individuals? But that's not enough. There has to be something else for an asset to qualify as a product. It has to also create value towards the business. And this is meant to be some form of building here, the business or the company. Even though maybe I should have drawn a group of people, because really businesses and companies, are a collection of people, of individuals, right? So here we also need to be ensure that the product creates a specific value towards the business. And that might be, for instance, to open up a new revenue stream, or to achieve a certain amount, generate a certain amount of revenue within a certain time frame. Or you could think about other benefits, such as achieving a profit target, probably for a more established, older product, or reducing cost, increasing productivity, developing the brand, or helping market and sell another product. So that'll then depend on what kind of product it is. Is it a product that directly generates revenue? Then you typically have things like revenue or monthly recurring revenue and profit as key business goals. Sorry, that's what I should write here on the right-hand side, business goals.
How much do you see, and this is just to kind of build off on the value, like what I see is a lot of times I talk to product owners and they don't even know what value is. They don't know how to define it. They don't know how to explain it. A lot of times they say like return on investment. So could you maybe just quickly elaborate on how to help product owners define value for a product? Or because I see a lot of product owners and even companies struggling to explain that.
Yeah, sure. So the value should really answer the why question. And why is it worthwhile for people to use the product or pay for the product in one way or another? What's in it for those individuals? And why would your business, why would the company invest in the product? Is it to generate revenue? Is it to support another product or service? Or is it to maybe reduce cost, as in the case of like a traditional IT product, a traditional IT app? And so the formula that I like to suggest to define what a product is the product has to do a good job for the users and possibly the customers, and it has to generate some tangible business value. Now, if you're interested in some form of a tool to capture those key pieces of information, you can take a look at my, if I can only find it, hopefully it's not going to take too long, at my product vision board. I don't know if anybody of you has worked with it. I've written too many blog posts, I think. Oh, come on. Yeah, this one hopefully will do.
Yeah, there it was. There.
So, okay, that's a sample one. Yeah, so here you go. Yeah, so you can use this little structure here. It's just one way to capture the needs and the business goals. And you have the vision at the top, which is the positive change that the product should create, or the purpose of a product. And then you have the target group. Those are the beneficiaries, the customers and users. The needs, again, focusing on the main problem or the main benefit or the main job, the primary job that the product should do for the users, and then the product itself and its key features that make it stand out, make it special in one way or another, and then the business goals. So that can be a helpful template, a helpful structure to clarify your thoughts and describe the product and describe the beneficiaries and the value it creates. And the key trick, or the trick here is, the key point is really to be specific. If I said, well, my healthy eating product should help people eat more healthily, which is like, well, yeah, I've just restated the vision. That's not specific enough. It has to be so specific that I can test it, that I can kind of find out if that benefit is truly desirable, or if that problem really is significant enough so that people do want to have it addressed. Similarly with the business goals, they have to be specific as well. It can be nice to try and make them measurable, but at least they have to be specific. And so in addition to being able then to validate my ideas, I'm also in a position to choose the right metrics or KPIs, key performance indicators, and measure how much value my product creates. But again, for me, it really starts with saying, who are the beneficiaries, the users and customers? What problem does my product solve for those individuals, or which benefit does it create? And what is the value? What are the benefits that my product offers to the business? Yeah. Right. It's a worthwhile exercise, particularly as products change over their life. Products grow if they're successful, and then sometimes what happens is that they grow so big that it's time to break them up. Think of those of you who are OS Mac users, Apple users. Apple fairly recently, I think that was 2019, finally unbundled the iTunes app that had grown so much over the years, from essentially the ability to purchase digital music online and then download it onto an iPod, to all sorts of things, you know, managing videos and reading Apple books and administering your iPhone. And it's just grew so big. And then finally Apple spun off three, or divided it into three new products. I think TV, podcasts, and music. So, you know, in that case, you have a product that has changed, that has been split into three. Yeah, and sometimes companies do unbundle, not. Yeah. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And Roman, you and I talked about time boxing these, and it's been roughly about 10 minutes. So do you want me just to remind you, or again,
yeah, I think that's probably
we don't
enough.
want to rush through these, but
No,
at the
but
same
that's
time,
probably enough. Yeah, cool. So I hope that was useful. Now the next question, I think, was about. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong screen. The next question was about main challenges product owners have when it comes to stakeholder collaboration, and how can you solve them? So I think in an Agile context, we'd really like to encourage stakeholders. And by stakeholders, you know, my understanding of stakeholders is that these would be people from within the business. So for a commercial revenue generating product, a stakeholder might be somebody from marketing, it might be a sales rep, it might be somebody from support, or possibly operations, or maybe finance, depending on the type of product that we have. So obviously in an Agile context, we'd like to encourage close collaboration. Now, if that's what we'd like to do, and then the question is, and I think for a product owner, that is, okay, yeah, we'd like to encourage close collaboration. And then the question is, how can we achieve this, and what can go wrong? And so for me, one of the key ingredients in order to enable effective collaboration is to build trust. So, you know, for me, if I think about collaboration, I think about trust. If there is not sufficient trust, then it's kind of hard to collaborate, right? So if I don't trust another person, if I don't have faith in the other person, if I don't believe that the other person watches out for me, or at least doesn't want to cause me any harm or disadvantage, then, you know, it's difficult to be open. It's difficult to, well, trust the other person. It's difficult to speak my mind, and it's difficult to, in a way, you know, be willing to rely on the other person, open up to the individual. You know, so whenever you experience any collaboration issues, my first question would be, well, is there maybe a trust issue? And if it is a trust issue, if there is some form of trust that's maybe lacking, then, you know, the follow-up question would be, okay, how can we build that trust? And so there are a number of things you can do in order to build trust. Just looking for a nice color to use. The first one is get to know people. And I think that's very worthwhile, particularly for product owners who've maybe just started to work with a group of stakeholders, to get to know the individuals and make time for that. And we're all influenced by our backgrounds and by our personal situation, our family situation. So, you know, it's kind of interesting to learn about people, find out about people, because that sometimes explains a behavior, you know, that people show. I remember being in a meeting a while back, and you know, one of the attendees was just going off on tangents all the time, and I thought it was an extremely difficult meeting, and I was getting increasingly impatient and, in a way, agitated and frustrated, and didn't quite know what to do. And only afterwards I found out that the person was going through a particularly difficult stage in her divorce, and, you know, that sort of allowed me then to empathize with her, and I felt a little bit guilty for having kind of sort of unkind thoughts about her, thinking like, oh man, I just wish she shut up. Can we just get on with things?
So it's really about that empathy, right? We talk, especially in product ownership, I know you've talked about it. It's empathizing and trying to look through other people's eyes and see what's going on versus just seeing
That's
it
right.
from our own perspective. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So, and I think it's easier to empathize with people if we get to know people a little bit. It's easier then to understand people, right? And in order to be able to empathize and get to know people, it's good to listen. Yeah, listen attentively and listen with an open mind. And even if a stakeholder makes a suggestion or requests, say, a feature, a piece of functionality we disagree with, then I think it's still worthwhile listening attentively, or trying to listen attentively, and being open-minded, at least initially, not judging too quickly, because first of all, maybe the feature really is a good idea and we're just biased and think, oh no, it can't be. But yeah, after a little bit of consideration, we discover, oh yes, we should definitely take on board that feature and get it implemented as soon as we can. But even if that's not the case, then, by attentively listening to somebody, we show the person that we care, that we value the person's perspective and contribution, and that builds trust.
Yeah.
So
what about,
those are.
What about like your tools? For instance, I've used like the Go roadmap and other things that you do to help in that collaboration. A lot of this is soft skills, but like I found a lot of times using some like other tools, even like story mapping, but like some of your tools that you've shared with the community, like those are really good to communicate and collaborate with the stakeholders. So I don't know if you want to maybe highlight some of those and how you have used those to help with collaboration with the stakeholders.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for suggesting that. So I'm jotting down joint decision making and planning. I think that's another great way how to, very practically collaborate with stakeholders and users. And there are a number of tools you can apply. It starts with coming up with a shared product vision and strategy. So you can use the product vision board structure that I showed you earlier, if you'd like to. And then I'm a big fan of translating a higher level vision into a more tangible product roadmap. And I like to work with outcome-based or goal-oriented product roadmaps that contain product goals. I think we've got a question about product goals, and I'm not sure how high up it is here in this void, how many votes it attracted. But the idea with a product goal is, well, at least that's my interpretation, it's a specific measurable benefit or outcome the product should create, and I like to suggest sort of in the next 3 months or so. And so having those, having a shared vision, having a shared strategy, and having a product roadmap that describes how the product is likely to develop and grow. Let me just quickly see if I can find a sample product roadmap so I can visualize what I'm talking about. I'll scroll here a little bit again. So here's a template, again, one of those little templates that I've created over the years that you might want to consider using. As you can see, the goal is here in the middle, and that's the desired outcome that should be achieved. And so, a great way to collaborate with the stakeholders is to agree on specific measurable benefits, product goals, outcomes that your product should create over the next 12 months. And that can then really help align people. It can help people work together. And you don't want to be in a situation where the stakeholders go off and everybody kind of does her or his own thing. They do their own thing, and then the marketing strategy and the marketing collateral doesn't fit, and the sales collateral and the sales strategy doesn't fit, and so forth. And the training material that was created for the service guys doesn't fit because everybody was doing their own thing, right? So we need integration, we need an alignment, but at the same time, we want to enable people to work autonomously, right? As product owners, we don't have the time, and often we don't have the expertise to kind of, essentially tell people what to do or babysit people. We've got a job to do ourselves. So for me, working with those type of goals strikes the balance and is kind of, achieves that alignment and at the same time the necessary level of autonomy. So
it's
having
also the level. I think one of the things that I've seen and the feedback that I've gotten from stakeholders is that, especially with the product roadmap, is that it's at the right level for the stakeholders a lot of times, and it's easy to communicate and it's easy for them to see as it evolves and changes. So so
that's great to hear. Thank you for sharing. Yeah. So often the product backlog is just a little bit too detailed, and the rate of change can be too high for stakeholders to truly understand it and work with it. So that's why I think it can be really helpful to complement it with a product roadmap. And I mean, if you want to work with product goals, and again, the latest version of the Scrum Guide has introduced the concept of a product goal, then you can put your product goals on the product roadmap and then just simply copy them into your backlogs. I find that quite handy.
yeah.
So joint workshops, joint decision-making, planning, and I should maybe also say review meetings, and that can be really powerful. Yeah.
How about we move? It's been again another 10 minutes, and I think it would be good to maybe shift to the third. That one had 7 votes, unique votes, and the question is: would you recommend breaking out agile teams into support and new development?
Generally speaking, no. So generally speaking, no, unless these teams are, I guess, virtual teams in the following sense, and that there is a I think I've got an article about this somewhere. So I'll see if I can find it quickly because it has a picture that I'd like to show. We'll see. Actually, that's probably under a different category.
Maybe while you're looking for that, it's really like in a lot of times what I've seen, it's like creating like a JV team. Support team and new development is like your varsity team, what we call it here. And there are some pros and there are some challenges, but I agree with you. Like it's much better if it's joined. So it looks like you have your stuff. So
that's right. Yes. So the drawback of working with a separate, in a way, development team and support team is that, in my experience, it can create a two-class society in the sense that nobody really wants to be on the support team and do the more, difficult bug fixing, maintenance tasks. Everybody would like to be on the feature team where you get to implement cool new functionality, and it's exciting and interesting. And I've also experienced that the setup can lead people who develop new functionality to have a slightly to have a slightly sloppy approach when it comes to quality, to software quality, because they don't have to fix the bugs. Somebody else will sort out the issues, and that can then lead to software that isn't as good as it could and should be. So the picture here suggests that that if you have a lot of technical debt, or you have a lot of bugs, you have a lot of maintenance work, then one way to deal with it, rather than having separate teams, is that you still have one team, or a number of teams who look after a product, but then the teams have volunteers, and 2 or 3 people per sprint from each team volunteer to do the maintenance work, to do the support work, to do the bug fixing work, and then at the end of the sprint, new people volunteer. And so that way, the majority of the people can focus on enhancing features or developing new features, and kind of not disturbed by having to do support, maintenance, bug fixing work. And so you have dedicated people who can take this on, but you avoid the drawbacks that I mentioned earlier. The loss of kind of accountability for substandard software, and also then the being stuck on a team and doing work that I don't really find particularly motivating and interesting. Yeah. So maybe something to consider.
Mm-hmm. Great. I'm thinking about jumping one ahead and then we'll come back to the other one. This one comes up a lot. What's the difference in Agile between a product owner and a product manager? Should it always be one person? This question comes a lot in my classes too, and I think it would be good if we could hear your opinion on this.
Yeah, sure. So, when I started working in a way properly with Agile practices, the people who I was working with were product managers. And then when I first introduced Scrum, or when I introduced Scrum for the first time, again, the people who would act as product owners were mainly product managers. So for me, I've always looked at a product owner in Scrum, the Scrum product owner, as, well, essentially the Agile product manager. And I find it interesting that when you look at the Scrum history, before Ken Schwaber, who mainly coined the Scrum terms, chose the term product owner, he actually used the term product manager for the role. Now, some people may say, okay, well, why did he then change his mind? Well, I think one of the reasons for calling the product manager product owner is that, particularly in an Agile context where there is so much collaboration, where we value collaboration. We talked about collaboration earlier, right? And we'd like to encourage collaboration. We'd like to involve the stakeholders and the development team members in the decision-making process. So we've got all this collaboration going on, where we have to make sure that if people can't agree, if people can't reach consensus within a realistic time frame, there's a person who can make a decision and move the process forward and progress the product. Now, that person in Scrum is called the product owner. So, maybe one way to look to sort of continue the discussion is to look at this little picture here. So what you see is a simplified version of Mike Cohn's planning onion. So I've simply distinguished between vision, strategy, and tactics. Vision is the purpose of our product strategy, is how do we get there. This is the general path that we've chosen. And tactics then are the specific steps along the path. You can think of the user stories and epics, all the good stuff in the product backlog. Now, in Scrum, that's my perspective. A Scrum product owner has full stack ownership and should own the product in its entirety. Again, for me, the Scrum product owner is very much an Agile product manager. However, other Agile frameworks have a different perspective on this. So if you look at SAFe, there's also a product owner. But in SAFe, the product owner, and that's my understanding of the role, is mainly a tactical role. So a SAFe product owner would work with one or more development teams and take responsibility, take charge of part of the product backlog, or I think in SAFe it's called a team backlog. So it's more a tactical person, more an inward focused person, or role, I should say, and has partial ownership of the product. And then there is a SAFe product manager who owns the strategic part and makes the strategic decisions and is more outward facing and would understand the market and the market trends and measure the product performance using KPIs and review the strategy and maybe work with a product roadmap if that is appropriate. So essentially what the scaling framework has done in order to facilitate scaling is it has taken the Scrum product owner role and split it into two roles. Now, that's one way how you can scale, and in certain circumstances that can make a lot of sense, particularly when your product has reached a certain stability and the strategy isn't too volatile. So typically, that's the case in maturity and decline, if you're familiar with the product lifecycle model. But what it has done is it has created even more confusion in the community and generally, in businesses, what it means to be a product owner.
It also has to do right with the authority level. Like, for instance, what I see is like what you're showing here, SAFe product manager, which again, I'm not a big fan of SAFe, but it's like you also see it in others, just named differently, like chief product owner and then product owner down below. But it really has to do with authority level, right? Yeah.
It has to do with the decision making, yeah. And
Exactly.
maybe some of you've seen this little diagram here that I created a while back. And so the idea really is just to illustrate different types of ownership. So that's why it's called 6 types of owners. So a Scrum product owner owns the product, and then if a person looks after a product capability, a major feature, say the ability to you go to an online retailer's website like Amazon, to the ability to look for a product on the Amazon web page, for me, is a feature, or a component. Somebody who looks after payment, the payment system, that will be a component owner. That's at least the terms that I like to use. And then we have the safe product owner, who takes care of the tactical decisions for a given product. And then, if we have a little, we have 2 products here, they may use a similar services. So we may want to take them out and encapsulate them, extract them into a platform. And then we have a platform owner. And platform owner is like a Scrum product owner, only looks after an internal technical product, right? And now we have a little portfolio, and sometimes it makes sense then to have a product portfolio owner. And as we've just heard, all these owners, they have ownership, but to a different level. So the level of decision-making authority and their responsibility and accountability will vary. So a product portfolio owner's job is to maximize the value of a group of products. A good example of a product portfolio might be Microsoft Office, with PowerPoint, Word, and Excel as the traditional members. Job of a Scrum product owner is to maximize the value of a product. Job of a feature owner is to maximize the value of a feature. I think it's just important to be clear on, if you have a product role, what is your responsibility and what is your decision-making authority? And I generally tend to recommend to my clients to either choose the term product owner or product manager. I find that it can create a lot of confusion when an organization uses both terms. And I've worked with businesses where the product managers were desperate to become these hip, new, trendy, agile product owners. When I've worked with companies where the product owners, they couldn't wait to become product managers and grow up and finally make important product decisions. And that was seen as a positive career move. So it can create quite a lot of division, and I think that's not desirable. So my suggestion again is use either product manager or product owner, and then maybe you have a feature manager or a feature owner, for instance, if you want to follow my model here, when you can have senior and junior product people, senior and junior product owners or product managers. But again, I think that just limits the confusion, at least to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's almost like it depends on your organizational governance, design, structure. So that's going to influence a lot this. How about let's move on. We have about maybe 20 minutes left, just a little shy of that. If we move to the next question, which I also think is something that's pretty common and I hear often, how can I get my team to write stories instead of relying on me or another person as their scribe?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so for me, the trick is to a certain extent, empower your team to take that ownership. And you won't believe it, there's another picture that I have that I'd like to show you quickly. Quick is relative. Here we go. So, I sometimes find that product owners and product people think they have to feed their development teams with detailed user stories or requirements essentially forever. And while sometimes that's true when you work with a new development team, a team where people maybe don't have much knowledge about the market, the domain, the users, the product, the competitors, they'll benefit from detailed requirements. And, the same thing is true when people haven't worked with agile practices and people are maybe more used to a traditional setting where you'd use a traditional detailed requirement specification. So then people will ask for those detailed user stories, those detailed requirements, and initially that can make sense to create them. But if you do that, I'd suggest that you create them together. So product backlog refinement, product backlog work should be a joint responsibility. So here on this diagram, it's written between the product owner and the development team. And that you actively transfer knowledge from, well, yourself as the product owner, you actively transfer knowledge into the development team and try and educate people about the market, the domain, the users and customers and so forth. One way to do this is to take some of the people along when you carry out some form of user research. So when you interview people, when you observe people, when you talk to customers and users, be it current customers and users or prospective customers and users. Another way to do this is to make sure that the development team members are present when a sprint review takes place, so they can directly hear, at least from selected users and customers, depending on the solution validation technique that you use, about how well the product works for them, and listen to the feedback. Yeah, so it's about actively transferring the knowledge, which in the short term may be more work, but in the long term should enable the development team to become more self-sufficient and take on the job of at least writing detailed user stories. So I'm not suggesting this, that as a product owner, as the person in charge of the product, you should not be involved in the product backlog work. But I don't think that you necessarily have to write every single detailed user stories, and you don't necessarily have to forever detail the user stories or create super detailed and spec'd out user stories. In fact, that was never the intention with user stories. The intention with user stories was that they would essentially capture a conversation or the essence of a conversation. So it's really about developing a shared understanding. It's really about the communication piece.
Roman,
so
a lot of people, if we just go back a little bit, a lot of people, you mentioned customers and users. And a lot of times people don't fully know the difference between customers and users. And I have my own way of explaining, but I would be interested to see, how do you typically explain? What's the difference between customer and a user?
So I think I touched upon it earlier when we talked about what is a product. A user is somebody who uses the product, employs it. So I was using Microsoft Office just a minute ago, or Microsoft PowerPoint. I'm the user, and then customer is the person who pays for the product in one way or another. So the example I gave earlier is that my business has subscribed to Microsoft Office, so my business will be the customer. And sometimes customers have different perspectives and needs and ideas from users, and vice versa. So it's,
and sometimes one can become another. Like the example that I use, if I'm buying a bike for my 4-year-old son, who's the customer, who's the user, right? My son is the customer, I'm the user. But
unless
if I'm
you decide to give it a go and you see if
sorry, it's the other way around.
Right.
Yeah, so my son is the user, I'm the customer. But if I'm buying a bike for myself, I'm both customer and a user. And my wife is the stakeholder in this instance. So that's another way, like how you can look at how things, a user sometimes is both customer and user, and sometimes it's different. So
really kind of focus, try and really transfer that knowledge into the team and enable the team. And at the same time, I think you should also be able to expect that your team is willing to support you, certainly support you in identifying and capturing user stories. That should be a truly joined responsibility, and it should be truly, a form of teamwork. And if that's not the case, then I would suggest that you talk about it in one of the upcoming retrospectives, and also maybe secure the necessary support from your Scrum Master or Agile coach.
Yeah. So here's an idea, Roman, that I have, and I've done this in the past, but we have 10 minutes. And a lot of times people have these questions. So like, if we limit it to 30 seconds, quick Roman's responses to these, would you be open, maybe instead of diving deeper into one, just going broader and answering some of these? So just pick and choose some of these questions, and in 30 seconds or less, just maybe give us some answers. But I think given that there were a lot of votes, at least those individuals that wanted to, and this is probably one of the few opportunities that they would get a chance to get your opinion on it, just give them a quick answer, maybe if you can, for some of these.
So we've got a question around applications in my organization are defined as products. Hopefully that's been addressed by the discussion we had earlier around what is a product. If not, then the test for if something is a product is, first of all, it has to serve a specific group of people. So you have to say, you know, what is the value it creates? What is the problem it solves or the benefit it creates? And who are those individuals? And at the same time, you have to say, okay, what is the value that my product largely on its own, independently, creates for my business? If you can answer those questions, then most likely you have a product, or, you know, the asset, or in this case, the app is a product. Yeah? So that's something you may want to do. And always look from the outside in, avoid the mistake of saying, oh, we have these systems in place, therefore each system has to be a product. Think about, try and look at your system landscape from a user perspective, and see how users interact with the various assets, and look at the user journeys in order to identify products. And then what does a product goal, good product goal, look like? How is it different than a strategic intent? So a product goal, again, I briefly touched upon it earlier. I would consider a good, effective product goal to be specific and measurable, and a goal that describes the benefit or outcome. So if I wanted to create a healthy eating product, then a good product goal for the very first release, the MVP, might be to help people become more aware of their eating habits, and at the same time acquire an initial user base. Yeah. So something that, you know, you might be able to achieve, say, in the next 3 months. Sometimes that time frame is too long, and then you maybe shoot for 6 weeks to 8 weeks. Sometimes 3 months is maybe too aggressive, and you need more time frame of 4 to 6 months. But somewhere, you know, within that sort of scale, that's, you know, usually an effective product goal. What's next? Do you have any tips on how to add effective acceptance criteria during sprint planning? Yes, I have. Don't do it. So
I was gonna say,
separate product backlog work from the sprint planning. So make sure that you refine and work on your product backlog before you move into the sprint planning meeting. Otherwise, your sprint planning meeting is likely to become very strenuous. It's likely to be overloaded, and the quality of the backlog work you do might be suboptimal. Yeah, so really make sure you invest in a product backlog refinement. When doing the engine behind the scenes that drives the product, how to do it in small releasable chunks. Now, I'm not quite sure what the engine here is, but you know, I suspect it might be something like a platform, like a software platform that encapsulates shared services or shared components. If that's what it is, then I would suggest you best start by addressing the needs of a small number of products, and by forming a team, or in closely involving the teams that build the software that sits on top of the platform or the engine, to make sure that the engine or platform really does a good job for those teams, because the users of that engine or that platform will be the development team members. Yeah. And otherwise, you know, you can pretty much, assuming that the engine or platform is managed as a product, you can pretty much use all standard product management techniques to do that. There's an article I wrote, I think about a year ago, about software platforms. Maybe refer to that and check it out. And we are doing Agile so wrong. How do we get to convincing management to go the route of continuous discovery and building features of value, rather than saying yes to every feature that a customer wants? Sometimes that has to do by actually moving away from building tailored, custom, bespoke products to, well, essentially commercial products. I've certainly seen companies struggle with that. So if you currently earn your money by running essentially projects and doing bespoke, custom work for individual clients, then you'd really have to change, you know, the way the business is set up and operates. Otherwise, it might be an empowerment issue, establishing effective, empowered, qualified, knowledgeable, professional product people, product owners. And the thing that you can do to help with this is that you, first of all, build trust with the stakeholders, as discussed earlier. And secondly, that you increase your expertise. The more expertise you have, the more likely people are to trust you and listen to you. Do you know any good practices how project managers could cooperate with product owners? Well, so if we're talking about Scrum product owners, and if you've set up Scrum in the right way and you've filled the Scrum roles with the right people, you don't need project managers. And you may have noticed that certainly in Scrum, the term project isn't really used. It's all about product. It's all about organizing around products, and it's all about then developing and progressing and enhancing products. So, you know, project managers typically face a choice. They can become team members, they can become Scrum masters or product owners. But in all those cases, their role will change significantly. So it's something to be aware of, I think. Yeah. Alternatively, if you currently have project managers who perform program management, some of those individuals might make good product portfolio managers, as I briefly showed in one of the pictures I shared with you. Then we have, should every feature request go through design sprints? No. So a design sprint, as the name says, that's at least my understanding, is really there to figure out what is the right user experience design approach for either brand new product or a product that is being significantly enhanced or changed. So it can be very useful then to spend a week and, well, going through that design sprint, but certainly not for every single feature. So that'd be really, again, for a brand new product or for a major change when you take your product to a new market or market segment, for instance. And then the final one I can see here is having trouble getting value into, having trouble getting value info from the business, making it difficult to prioritize using COD. Are any of the matrix approaches valuable, or are they anti-patterns? So I think, you know, whenever you are the product owner, you have to really understand the value that your product should create for the business. I wouldn't expect that any of the business stakeholders have to tell you. It's really something that you need to know, and you have to take responsibility of the product's ability to create value towards the users and towards the business. And then you have to think about, you know, how you can ensure that that you maximize that value and that the desired value is created. And, again, as I briefly hinted at earlier, the model that I like to use is by starting out with a product strategy and then test out that strategy, validate that strategy, translate it into a product roadmap, and then derive a product backlog from that product roadmap via a product goal, via one of the product goals that's on the product roadmap. If that is useful to you, you know, it's probably something that you need to look into in a little bit more detail if you're interested and possibly experiment with.
Maybe so one last question, Roman, as we're kind of here. It's the second one here, and I haven't voted, and I would vote for this one. I'm currently writing a book. Do you have any advice I should consider to get it done and published? I'm actually writing a book as well, so I'm interested as well in this question. So maybe you can just quickly, for me and this other person, just answer that question.
Sure.
You've written 3 books. For how many?
4, I think.
4, yeah. So any advice for us inspiring writers?
Well, you know, I'd look at a book as a product in its own right. So be clear on who is the target audience, who are the readers, and be clear on why people will want to use the product, and be clear on why you write that product. You know, what is the benefit that you want to get out of that product? And depending on the benefit that you want to achieve by offering this product, by writing this product, think about which route you want to go down. Is it self-publication or working with an established publisher? If you're a first-time author and you want to write a book to establish your name or to grow your reputation, to grow your brand, it can be beneficial to work with an established publisher. Well, if that's less the case, if you feel that won't necessarily be very beneficial for you, then go down the route of self-publication. It just means that you have a little bit more work, because you'll have to then take care of you'll have to find development editors if you need any, you have to hire copy editors, you have to work with a designer, artists for the cover, but also for any graphics that you use. And so you have that production part that an established publisher would take care of. And then what the final thing I'd say, again, that's related to the value that your product should create and how big or focused the audience, the group of readers are likely to be. I have a preference to write and to read, I have to say, fairly focused books. So, if you think about writing a book on Agile, then I'd say, well, maybe there's a specific topic within the big Agile realm that is interesting. Even if you say, I'd like to write a book about product ownership, I'd say, like, that's still so big. Maybe write a book about, product backlog, or even specific product backlog management aspects. You could write a book on prioritization. And as always, as any product development effort, it's a balance between having a product that is kind of too focused, so your market is too small and it's no longer attractive and appealing, and a book that is kind of too big and the product that is too bloated and does too many things for too many people and doesn't offer a compelling value proposition.